Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into one of the least relaxing, most accidentally horrifying corners of human history, medieval torture. No, this isn't your ex's idea of just talking, or a modern-day team-building exercise that involves trust falls and silent weeping. This is the real deal, the era when even breaking the law felt like a dare, and your chances of survival were lower than a medieval peasant's life expectancy. If you thought Monday morning meetings were torture, just wait until you meet the Iron Maiden. Before you get too comfortable, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of nonsense. Leave a comment telling me which medieval punishment you think you could survive. I love seeing where you're listening from and what time it is, especially because, statistically, half of you are awake at 3 in the morning for no good reason. Now, dim the lights. Put a fan on for that soothing white noise. Maybe nestle deep under your duvet. Tuck your feet in, so no medieval rats mistake them for a midnight snack. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered why everyone in medieval Europe seemed one bad haircut away from getting tossed in the dungeon? Were people really getting tortured all the time? Or was it just a few overzealous kings with too much free time and not enough therapy? Was torture an everyday risk? Or just a fun weekend activity for the local constable? Did anyone ever actually confess to their crimes? Or did everyone just invent wild stories because they couldn't handle one more minute of the stocks? And most importantly, would you have survived a day in a world where torture was less a crime and more of a hobby? Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1350. You don't know why, but you've already been accused of something. The good news? You have all your teeth. The bad news? The local magistrate is very interested in changing that. Let's begin. The morning sun creeps in through your one grimy window, and you're already in trouble. Justice in medieval times doesn't involve court dates and polite emails. It's more of a vibe. The local bailiff points at you, your neighbour swears you looked suspicious, and congratulations, you're now property of the justice system. There's no presumption of innocence, just presumption of let's see what you know and how loud you can yell. It doesn't matter that all you did last night was steal an extra turnip. Or more likely, just look hungry in the direction of someone else's turnip. In the Middle Ages, guilt is less about facts and more about general consensus. If 3 people say you look shifty, you're in for a rough day. If you're lucky, the bailiff will just glare at you and mutter something about the stocks. If you're not, you'll be marched through muddy streets to face the town's version of due process, which mostly involves standing around while villagers throw increasingly creative insults your way. There's no right to remain silent. In fact, silence is suspicious. If you talk too much, you're hiding something. If you don't talk enough, you're hiding everything. Either way, someone fetches the constable. He's usually the one who smells faintly of onions and misplaced authority, and whose job satisfaction goes up the more people cry in public. You're led to the centre of town, because nothing says justice like an audience. The villagers gather, ready to offer their expert legal opinions, which are usually just wild guesses or personal grudges. The town crier is already preparing his best. Hear ye, and you're starting to realise you probably should have moved to a village with fewer people who remember the time you borrowed a shovel and didn't give it back. The trial isn't so much a search for truth as it is a performance. Witnesses line up, eager to share any memory that vaguely fits the crime. I saw him walking near the church, says old Margaret, who's never forgiven you for stepping on her cat in 1346. He sneezed twice yesterday, someone adds, and the crowd murmurs. Suspicious indeed. You're starting to suspect that allergies are illegal. If you think you can talk your way out of it, think again. Medieval justice is allergic to logic. Maybe you try an alibi. I was home all night, your worship. But your mother can't back you up. She's busy being interrogated for witchcraft down the street. The best defense you have is I didn't do it. And that's considered a confession by another name. The local judge, whose main legal qualification is owning the biggest hat, will eventually ask for proof. This is medieval code for does anyone feel like dramatically fainting or pointing fingers right now? Sometimes the entire thing is decided by who can shout the loudest or who can faint most convincingly. If you're not careful, you'll find yourself convicted of theft, heresy, and looking funny at the Lord's daughter all in the same morning. If, by some miracle, you escape with a warning, congratulations, you're now on the official list of people to keep an eye on. You'll spend the next few weeks jumping every time someone says your name, avoiding eye contact with the constable, and wondering if it's possible to erase your existence from the town records using only a wet sponge and denial. But most likely, your fate is sealed before the first rooster crows. Justice in medieval Europe isn't about what you did. It's about what people want to believe you did, and how much entertainment they can squeeze out of your misery before breakfast. You can try to plead your case, but around here, innocent until proven guilty is just a modern fantasy, one that's several centuries, and about 10,000 bruised egos away from reality. So, as you stand there, shivering in the morning fog, remember, medieval justice is fast, theatrical, and completely unpredictable. Your best defense is a good pair of running shoes, or, failing that, a convincing feint. Either way, hope you like attention, because in the Middle Ages, the law is always watching, and it's never in a good mood. Maybe you stole a chicken, maybe you didn't. Doesn't matter. In the medieval world, all it takes is a bad rumor, an unpaid debt, or an unfortunate resemblance to someone the sheriff doesn't like. Next thing you know, you're being invited to a friendly chat. Chain's optional. Sometimes it's not even that dramatic. Maybe you just happened to be walking past the town market at the exact moment Farmer Greg realized his prized goose was missing. There you are, minding your own business, when suddenly you're surrounded by people who have never spoken to you before, but who are suddenly very confident in their ability to identify poultry thieves. You don't even like geese. You're allergic to feathers. Congratulations, you're still a suspect. And the accusations themselves, oh, they're wonderfully vague. Nobody needs actual evidence. In fact, evidence is almost suspiciously modern. All it takes is a shaky finger pointed your direction and a loud declaration, I saw them lurking. Never mind that lurking is just medieval for standing still. Suddenly, the town gossips have enough material for a year's worth of scandal. Your fate now rests in the hands of people whose main qualifications are 1. Being awake at the time, 2. Knowing how to yell, and 3. Still holding a grudge from that time you stepped on their turnip patch. It's less a legal system, and more an ongoing improv show where the audience votes you off the island. Sometimes it starts small, a sideways glance from the local baker, a rumour whispered over sour ale at the tavern, a child who claims you looked at him funny. Other times, it's spectacular. Maybe you catch the attention of a visiting noble who decides, entirely at random, that your face reminds him of someone who owes him money. Next thing you know, the whole village is nodding in agreement, because disagreeing with a noble is its own special brand of dangerous. The real fun begins when the authorities get involved. The local sheriff shows up with 2 of his least enthusiastic deputies, both of whom look like they'd rather be literally anywhere else. You're invited to accompany them for questioning. You try to ask what this is about, but they just shrug and say, "We'll find out together," reassuring. This is where medieval hospitality really shines. If you're lucky, the sheriff's office is only mildly damp, with a pleasant aroma of old cheese and unresolved crimes. If you're unlucky, you're led to a windowless storeroom and offered a seat on a barrel that leaks something suspiciously sticky. They offer you some water, but it's best not to accept. Not unless you want to confess to inventing the plague. The questioning is rarely about the actual crime. It's more about your general vibe. Did you look nervous when they mentioned the missing chicken? Did you blink too fast? Did you stutter? Or, worst of all, try to defend yourself? That's a classic sign of guilt. The only thing more suspicious than protesting your innocence is not protesting enough. But wait, there's more. In the medieval world, guilt is contagious. If you're accused, your family's suddenly under suspicion too. Your neighbor's cousin's friend's dog starts barking whenever you pass. More proof. Your aunt once bought a suspiciously large number of onions. That's basically a confession. Don't bother asking for a lawyer. The closest thing to legal advice is old Bert in the corner, who's happy to explain that nobody's ever gotten out of this room without at least one slap to the face. Your best option is to apologize, agree with whatever they suggest, and pray to every saint you can remember. If things are going badly, someone will eventually suggest the question, which is medieval code for, "Would you like to try out our new thumbscrews?" If things go well, you're merely fined, scolded, or forced to apologize publicly, which in some ways is worse than the fine. The real punishment, though, is knowing that from now on, every time something goes missing, everyone's going to glance your way. So remember, in the Middle Ages, getting accused is less about crime and more about bad luck, a weird hat, or just being in the wrong place with the wrong face. You can try to keep your head down, but don't crouch. That's lurking, and lurking is basically a confession. Good luck out there. Before we get to the creative stuff, let's start simple. The stocks, medieval Europe's answer to time. Out, except your neighbors throw rotten turnips at your head, and the only thing that gets rehabilitated is everyone's throwing arm. Your only crime? Owning a face people find annoying. Stocks are the gateway drug of medieval punishments. Low tech, high humiliation, and conveniently located right in the middle of town. You know, for maximum foot traffic. All it takes is a mildly cranky town official or an overzealous church warden with a score to settle, and suddenly you're the centerpiece of the local square, head and hands stuck through a wooden frame. Public accountability, they call it. Free entertainment, mutter the villagers, lining up with yesterday's leftover vegetables and this morning's pent-up aggression. The setup is simple. One heavy plank of wood, 2 holes for your hands, 1 for your neck, and a guarantee that you'll never get comfortable. The stocks are engineered to make you feel every itch, every cramp, and every pang of regret for not moving to a less enthusiastic town. As you wiggle, you discover that the splinters are strategically placed for maximum discomfort, and the only ergonomic feature is the distant hope that it'll rain, and you'll be too numb to notice the pain. The best part? You're not alone. The stocks are almost always full. One guy accused of stealing bread, another for impure thoughts, and someone else who just lost a bet with the mayor. There's no privacy in medieval justice. If you thought your open plan office was invasive, trying to maintain your dignity while a passing child uses your head as a table for his pie. And then the real fun begins. The villagers arrive. Some bring fruit. Most bring attitude. The best throwers are the elderly women, who have spent decades perfecting their aim on neighborhood cats and disappointing husbands. Children laugh, dogs bark, and the local poet sees an opportunity for fresh material. Sometimes, your friends show up and pretend not to know you. Other times, your enemies arrive with a suspiciously well-prepared basket of suspiciously soft tomatoes. Time passes differently in the stocks. 5 minutes feels like an hour feels like forever, and by midday you're convinced you've become a permanent part of the landscape. You start reflecting on your life choices. Should you have smiled less at the baker's wife? Should you have returned that borrowed pitchfork in 1348 instead of 1351? Should you have chosen a town where the stocks are only decorative? Too late now. If you're lucky, it's a quiet market day, and the worst you get is a few jeers and some stale bread in the hair. If you're unlucky, it's festival season, and you become the unofficial guess what's in my pocket booth for sticky-fingered children and overly curious goats. The humiliation is meant to teach you a lesson, but mostly it just gives you a new phobia of root vegetables and loud crowds. And don't count on a quick release. Your sentence might be an hour, a day, or until the constable gets bored. Occasionally, a merciful friend will bribe the jailer to let you out early, though usually they just stick around to watch you get pelted with cabbages. And when you're finally let out, stiff, sore, and smelling like a compost heap, You get to take the walk of shame home through streets echoing with laughter and fresh rumors about what you did. But in the end, the stocks are merciful by medieval standards. You keep your limbs, most of your teeth, and at least a few shreds of self-respect, maybe. Next time you're tempted to complain about community service or a parking ticket, remember, in the Middle Ages, the only thing standing between you and a faceful of turnip was a very forgiving magistrate and your own ability to look inconspicuous. Medieval justice. Come for the fairness, stay for the free produce. You're standing in the town square, head and hands clamped in wood, and someone's grandmother just invented the pie-to-the-face routine, using an actual pie. Humiliation is a spectator sport, and you're the main event. The good news? At least you're outside. Unfortunately, that's also the bad news. Because medieval townsfolk love nothing more than a good spectacle, and today you're providing it. The market is bustling. Someone's hawking onions, a lute player's wheezing through his greatest hit, and a cluster of children are already arguing over who gets first throw at your general direction. In the absence of television, this is prime-time entertainment. Think of it as the original reality show, except you can actually taste the feedback. It doesn't take long for the crowd to form. You spot neighbors you've known for years, looking at you with a mixture of delight and pity. Someone waves, helpfully, but also holding a suspiciously lumpy apple. Medieval social media is alive and well, except instead of gossip in the group chat, it's shouted loudly, right at you, in front of everyone you went to elementary ploughing school with. Privacy? Not a chance. Dignity? That left when the constable adjusted the height of your wooden neck hole for the best crowd view. Soon, the first volley begins. Rotten tomatoes, mouldy bread, the occasional onion with a personality. Anything that can be thrown will be thrown. Accuracy is not required, but enthusiasm is. Even the town priest, who's supposed to be above such things, is seen encouraging the local children with tips on proper pitching technique. Someone starts a song, and now you have a theme tune. You don't know the lyrics, but you're pretty sure they rhyme with smells. The physical discomfort is one thing, but the real torture is social. You can hear the whispers and laughter, the barely muffled jokes. You're suddenly aware of every odd thing you've ever done. That time you tripped over your own feet at the spring festival, or that unfortunate incident with the runaway goose. Now it's all public record, shouted gleefully for the whole town to hear. If you had a reputation, it's currently sliding down the stocks and into a puddle of something unidentifiable. But humiliation isn't just for criminals. In fact, most people in the stocks aren't dangerous. They're just unlucky. Maybe you owed someone money, said the wrong thing to the wrong person, or looked a little too smug after beating the sheriff at dice. The bar for public menace is set lower than a limbo stick at a giant's party. The punishment fits the crime, which is to say, it rarely fits at all. Your greatest offence might be having a face people remember, when they're looking for someone to blame for the mysterious disappearance of the mayor's cheese wheel. And yet, there's a certain strange camaraderie in the experience. You're not alone. Next to you is the baker's apprentice, in for suspicious bread. And on your other side, the blacksmith's cousin, apparently guilty of enthusiastic whistling after midnight. Together you weather the storm, exchange deadpan jokes, and bond over the fact that at least nobody is swinging an axe at your head, yet. Hours pass, your dignity erodes. By the time the constable releases you, you've acquired a new haircut, thanks to the onions, a full-face exfoliation, thanks to the stale bread, and a reputation that will haunt you for months. People will greet you with a knowing nod, or maybe a giggle, every time you step outside. For a while, you're that person from the stocks. Not your best look, but hey, at least you're alive to be embarrassed about it. Later, as you stagger home, wiping mystery fruit from your eyebrows and replaying every humiliating second in your mind, you find a small, dark comfort. Tomorrow, someone else will take your place. Because in the Middle Ages, Public humiliation is a rotating privilege, a town tradition, a group therapy session, and a reminder that reputations are as fragile as yesterday's pie crust. And so, you survive. Soggy, sticky, slightly famous for all the wrong reasons, but, mercifully, still in one piece. No lawyers here, just the medieval version of let's see what happens. Trial by fire, trial by water, trial by walk, 9 steps with this red-hot iron, and try not to drop it. The local priest insists that God will save the innocent. Spoiler, he doesn't. In the modern world, justice is about evidence, rights, and maybe the occasional dramatic objection in a courtroom. In the Middle Ages, it's more about which elements you fear most. If you're accused of a crime and there's no clear proof, congratulations. You're now the star of a live-action science experiment, but with higher stakes and absolutely no safety goggles. Let's start with trial by fire. This is as literal as it sounds. You, your trembling hands, and a red-hot chunk of metal fresh from the village forge. The idea is simple. Carry the burning iron for several steps, place it gently on the altar, and then wait. After 3 days, everyone gathers around to inspect your wounds. If your hand is miraculously healed and you look unbothered, you're innocent. If, on the other hand, you still have visible burns and possibly the world's worst manicure, you're guilty. Try to explain to the priest that you're not a salamander and see how far that gets you. Maybe you luck out and draw trial by water instead. You're tied up and tossed into a handy body of water. The rules? Float, and you're a witch or criminal. Sink, and you're innocent. Though now you're also in urgent need of a lifeguard. In practice, this means that surviving the ordeal is automatic proof of guilt, while drowning is a kind of aquatic vindication. It's a real win-win, assuming you like your justice system with a side of irony and lungfuls of pond scum. Sometimes the ordeal is even more creative. There's the trial by boiling water, which involves plunging your hand into a cauldron and fishing out a stone from the bottom. There's trial by combat. Essentially, let's fight about it, but in front of a large audience with even larger axes. There's even ordeal by bread, for the truly special cases. You must eat an entire dry loaf without choking. If you do choke, clearly you're guilty. If you don't, everyone just stares at you for eating that much bread without water and starts a new rumor about your suspiciously powerful jaw. And always, standing by, is the local priest. He blesses the tools, says a few encouraging words, God is watching, and so is everyone else, and reminds everyone that divine intervention will protect the innocent. This is comforting until you remember that, historically, the innocent seem to have the same survival rate as houseplants in a blackout. As the accused, your fate depends on your pain tolerance, your swimming skills, and whether you remembered to moisturize. Villagers whisper prayers for you, some sincere, some just eager for a good show. For the crowd, it's the highlight of the week. Vendors show up with snacks, kids get the day off work, and the local gossip is already working on tomorrow's version of events. If you survive the ordeal, people start eyeing you with a new level of suspicion. Innocence, in this system, looks a lot like witchcraft. If you don't survive, you become a cautionary tale and maybe someone else's excuse for missing church that week. Either way, the only certainty is pain, embarrassment, and a new respect for the basic human right to a boring, paperwork-filled trial. So next time you hear someone long for the good old days, just remember, medieval justice was a game of physics, biology, and public humiliation. The rules? Don't burn, don't drown, don't drop the iron, and most importantly, don't expect mercy from the elements or from your neighbours with the best seats in the house. Accused of witchcraft, gossip, or having an opinion? Time for a dunking. You're tied to a chair and plunged repeatedly into the village pond, which is slightly warmer than a medieval handshake and about as hygienic as licking the town pig. The dunking stool is proof that, in the Middle Ages, having a mouth was an occupational hazard, especially if you were a woman, a known chatterbox. or the unlucky soul caught disagreeing with the local baker's mother-in-law. The system was simple. Got a troublesome neighbour? Accuse them of being difficult, talking back, or, if you're feeling really creative, bewitching my cabbages. Within hours, half the village is crowded around the pond, eager for a bit of soggy drama. Let's set the scene. The accused is lashed to a long wooden chair, a device that wobbles with every breeze and has been repaired so many times it's basically held together by hope, mud, and a few bits of string. You, meanwhile, are thinking about every time you muttered under your breath about the Lord's haircut, because suddenly that's a crime too. As the sentence is read out, the crowd buzzes with anticipation. Even people who never leave their cottages for anything but church and cheese are jostling for a front-row view. Local children perch on fence posts, dogs bark in excitement, and one man who always arrives suspiciously early has brought snacks, likely to be confiscated later as evidence. The pond itself is not scenic. It is, in fact, a festering mess of frog spawn, lost shoes, and the unspoken dreams of everyone who ever fell in and didn't come out smiling. Once secured in the chair, you're hoisted up over the murky water, given a final chance to confess your wicked ways, and then splash! Down you go, into water that has seen more secrets than the town priest's confessional. The villagers cheer. You surface, spluttering, and immediately realize that you'd rather be almost anywhere else, including, quite possibly, the stocks, which now seem like a spa day by comparison. And you're not just dunked once. Oh no, dunking is a sport of endurance. Up you come, gasping for air and blinking through pond scum, only to be asked, "Have you learned your lesson?" The answer is always yes, but apparently that's not good enough. Down you go again. Medieval crowd control theory is that the more times you're dunked, the less likely you are to gossip or, survive. If you're accused of witchcraft, the logic gets even better. If you drown, you were innocent. If you float, you're obviously a witch, and now you're in even bigger trouble. It's the kind of system only someone with a leaky rowboat and a grudge could invent. The real kicker? The entire process is designed to teach you, and everyone watching, a lesson. Namely, don't make waves. Unfortunately, you're currently making quite a few, mostly with your elbows. When your turn finally ends, and the local officials decide you've been adequately waterlogged, you're untied and allowed to crawl, sopping and shivering, out of the pond. The crowd disperses, already speculating about next week's likely candidate. You get to trudge home, dripping, to a house where hot shower is a phrase no one has ever heard, and warm towel means the goat didn't sleep on your laundry pile last night. Some medieval punishments scar your reputation. The dunking stool leaves you with that, plus an entirely new relationship with every duck in town. But hey, you survived. In a world where gossip is punished with a splash and innocence is proven by a lung capacity test, you might just start keeping your opinions to yourself, at least until the next festival. And remember, if you ever find yourself missing the Middle Ages, just stick your head in a muddy puddle while strangers yell at you. That's basically the same thing minus the chair. Thought you were tired now? Imagine being kept awake for days by angry monks with bells, pots, and theological debates. You're so exhausted that you start confessing to crimes you haven't even heard of, just so someone lets you take a nap. Forget waterboarding, red-hot pokers, or even the dreaded stocks. If you want to get someone to spill their secrets in the Middle Ages, you don't need fancy gadgets. Just a group of devout insomniacs and a total disregard for the circadian rhythm. Medieval torturers may have invented dozens of terrifying devices, but their most effective weapon, the humble absence of sleep. It's cheap, portable, and can be administered by anyone with enough spare time and access to an annoyingly large bell. It starts off slowly. Maybe you're thrown into a cell next to the monastery kitchen, where the only thing separating you from the choir's all-night chant practice is a wall made of hope and deteriorating mortar. The monks seem friendly at first. "Would you like some water?" they ask. "Do you need a blanket?" What they don't mention is that your bed is a slab of wood, and the only pillow is your own guilt. The minute you close your eyes, they begin. First come the bells, not the melodic call to prayer kind. These are more like wake up and regret your existence bells, rung at random intervals, just in case you started dreaming about escape. If you're lucky, they'll throw in some pots and pans for variety, clanging them together with the enthusiasm of toddlers after 3 cups of mead. Then comes the theological debate. You wouldn't think a heated discussion about the finer points of transubstantiation could cause physical pain, but you'd be wrong. The monks argue about the number of angels that can dance on the head of a pin, the relative merits of fish versus bread on holy days, and whether your soul is, technically speaking, already halfway to purgatory. You try to block it out, but sleep deprivation works fast. Before you know it, every word feels like a lullaby you're not allowed to answer. As the hours, and then days, wear on, your sense of time dissolves. Daylight, candlelight, torchlight. It all blends together in a fog of exhaustion and existential dread. You're so tired that your thoughts stop making sense. Did I really steal that loaf of bread in 1342, or did I just dream I was a squirrel? At some point, you admit to plotting against the king, inventing the colour yellow, and being personally responsible for the mice in the chapel. It's all part of the plan. Medieval interrogators knew that tired brains are flexible brains, willing to believe, admit, or apologize for just about anything if it means a chance to close their eyes. The confession they want might not even be related to your original crime. Sometimes you'll just blurt out the last thing you remember. I stole the goose, I ate the cheese. Please, just let me nap. The monks nod solemnly, scribble it down, and then ring the bell again, just for good measure. And unlike some tortures, there's no visible scar. When it's finally over, you stagger out of your cell looking exactly like every parent of a newborn in history. Wild-eyed, slightly delirious, and ready to swear allegiance to anyone who promises you a mattress. Your reputation? Shot. Your memory? Gone. Your ability to form coherent sentences? Questionable. But at least you survived. In a world where confession is just a sleepless night away, maybe the real miracle is that anyone ever got any rest at all. So next time you're struggling through a late-night email or lying awake because your neighbor's dog won't stop barking, just remember, you could be in medieval Europe, desperately wishing for 5 minutes of peace between bell rings and guilt trips. Now, tuck yourself in. You've earned it. And pray the only thing waking you up tonight is your own snoring. Time for some medieval chiropractic. The rack is a giant wooden frame where you're tied up and slowly stretched, as if someone thought your arms were spaghetti and needed to check for al dente. Good for your posture, bad for your everything else. You probably thought medieval fitness was all about hauling firewood and sprinting away from angry geese. But the rack is here to take your flexibility to the next level. It's the ultimate in unwanted stretching routines. No warm-up, no cool-down, just a crash course in anatomy, starring you. If you've ever thought, maybe I could use an extra inch of height, the medieval justice system was ready to help, but only in the least comfortable way imaginable. Here's how it works. You're escorted to a dim, chilly chamber, all exposed beams and echoing footsteps, the air thick with a mix of damp stone and the faint whiff of someone else's regrets. At the center of the room waits the rack, a sturdy wooden rectangle with rollers at both ends and a collection of ropes that look just a bit too eager. It's less torture device, more DIY home renovation project gone rogue. Your ankles are strapped down at one end, your wrists at the other. Maybe the torturer makes small talk, asks about your family, offers career advice. Then, with a dramatic creak, the rollers start to turn. You feel the tension first in your arms, then your back, and finally in your legs, which are now convinced they've been enrolled in an unsolicited yoga class. If you're lucky, the session is short. If not, you start to realize why people in the Middle Ages kept their secrets close and their joints closer. The philosophy behind the rack is simple. Everything talks eventually. People, bones, joints, even the will to live. Every crank is a question. Ready to confess yet? And every inch you stretch is a gentle reminder that medieval dental plans were limited, but the orthopedic packages were positively sadistic. It doesn't matter what you're accused of, stealing bread, heresy, or just being in the wrong place with suspiciously symmetrical elbows, the rack is the answer to questions you didn't know you had. The experience is, in a word, immersive. You're acutely aware of every vertebra, every sinew, every life choice that led to you being turned into human taffy. There's the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, they'll get bored and let you go early. Spoiler, they won't. Instead, the audience, because there's always an audience, watches with a mix of fascination, pity, and the giddy relief that, for once, it isn't them. Medieval torturers, in their defense, were nothing if not inventive. Some swore that a good stretch aligned the humors or released negative energies, which is a nice way of saying makes you say whatever we want. Others just like the noise. Either way, you're learning firsthand why being on the rack eventually became shorthand for a really bad day at the office. Eventually, if you're still holding out, maybe you're innocent or just very stubborn, they might turn the crank another notch. Sometimes they stop to ask for names, secrets, or your favorite color. At that point, you'd probably give up your grandmother's pottage recipe if it meant a break. Even if you do confess, it's rarely the end. The rack is just one stop on the medieval spa circuit. When it's over, you're released with all the grace of a marionette whose strings just got snipped. Your joints creak, your arms feel several inches longer, and your walk is now a local legend. The townspeople will whisper, "That's the one who survived the rack," which is both a badge of honor and a solid excuse to avoid any and all group stretching activities for the rest of your life. In short, the rack is medieval justice's answer to how can we make being uncomfortable even worse. You walk away, eventually, wiser, stretchier, and significantly more grateful for your boring, unspectacular, unstretched modern spine. Head through a hole, arms through two more, and all you can do is wait. Everyone you've ever annoyed lines up to throw whatever they find handy. Old bread, dead rats, the medieval equivalent of negative Yelp reviews. Smile for the crowd. Welcome to the pillory, the social media platform of medieval justice. Except you can't log off, and blocking people is not an option. If stocks are the punishment for being a general nuisance, the pillory is what you get for making enemies with style. Your head and hands are locked in place, which gives you hours to reflect on your life choices, posture, and why you didn't flee to France when you had the chance. The device itself is simple. One wooden board at neck height with three charmingly uncomfortable holes. The town square is the setting, and you, of course, are the feature presentation. If you were hoping for a little peace and quiet, you're in the wrong place. The pillory is always set up in the busiest intersection, so everyone you've ever met or tried to avoid can drop by to say hello or hurl a turnip at your face. It starts innocently enough. The first hour is just curious children pointing and giggling, while a couple of town elders walk by and sigh dramatically, remembering the good old days when pillories were built sturdier and criminals had the decency to look ashamed. But soon, the real fun begins. Your least favourite neighbour arrives, carrying a suspiciously large sack of stale pastries. The town's gossips gather to critique your hair and your technique for standing awkwardly. If you're especially unlucky, the local livestock dealer decides this is the moment to clean out his inventory. The pillory isn't just about pain or embarrassment, it's about making a statement. Being in the pillory is the medieval way of letting everyone know you have, at least temporarily, lost the popularity contest. Unlike the stocks, which mostly target your lower half, the pillory puts your face right at eye and, throwing, level. This means there's no missing you. Anyone with an old apple, some bad cheese, or unresolved childhood trauma gets a chance to share. After the first wave of projectiles, you settle into an odd routine. Flinch, brace, wipe, repeat. You try to guess what's coming next. A cabbage? A handful of mud? The baker's least successful experiment? Sometimes you even get a brief break as the crowd thins out, but don't get too comfortable. That's when the poets and minstrels show up to compose impromptu ballads about your crime, your nose, and your inability to dodge. Their rhymes are terrible, but the melody is catchy enough to haunt your dreams for weeks. It's not all humiliation, though. Occasionally someone sneaks you a sip of ale or a bit of fresh bread, sympathy from a friend, or maybe someone who just wants a good story for later. You nod gratefully, but with your head clamped in oak. Gratitude mostly looks like aggressive blinking. And the rumors. By the end of the day, you'll be legendary for things you didn't even do. Someone swears they saw you stealing chickens in your sleep. Another claims you single-handedly caused last year's bad harvest. By dusk, you've become a local myth, part villain, part misunderstood anti-hero, and entirely covered in pie crust. Eventually, the town constable releases you, and you stumble out of the pillory a little sore, a lot stickier, and permanently upgraded to notorious. Children point as you pass. Adults greet you with a knowing smirk. For a week or two, everyone remembers your stint in the selfie booth. Then someone else does something foolish, and you fade back into glorious obscurity. In the end, the pillory is a lesson in humility, resilience, and the perils of communal living. Next time you complain about a bad review online, remember, at least no one is physically pelting you with cheese while a lute player sings about your personal hygiene. Yet, congratulations! You're about to learn the true meaning of corporate discipline. Flogged in public for everything from theft to just being mouthy, you get to take home a new set of stripes, no charge. The whipping post is the medieval answer to employee performance reviews. Except, instead of a stern memo and a warning about team synergy, you're tied to a wooden pole in the town square and given the kind of feedback that leaves a lasting impression. Sometimes you get the feeling that the local authorities just wanted to see what would happen if you combined public humiliation, physical pain, and a crowd with nothing better to do. Spoiler: what happens is never fun for you. The process is simple. First, someone official, usually a man in a very serious hat, reads out your crime to a crowd that's already heard 3 other crimes this week and is hungry for some variety. Then you're brought forward and fastened securely to the post. The rope is scratchy, the wood is splintery, and the only comfort is knowing you won't be bored for the next 10 minutes. If you're picturing something dramatic and ceremonial, you'd be wrong. The whip itself is rarely the fancy kind you see in movies. It's usually a strip of leather, maybe a knotted cord, occasionally a flexible branch cut from the nearest tree. Sometimes the whipper is a professional. Other times, it's just the town's most annoyed citizen with good arm strength and a flexible schedule. Their aim? Variable. Their enthusiasm? Alarmingly consistent. The first lash always gets a reaction, mostly from the audience. Children gasp, old men nod sagely, and someone in the back always shouts harder, even if they have no idea what you did. The pain is sharp and immediate, but the embarrassment might be worse. You try to look dignified, but it's difficult to maintain your composure while yelping in public and realizing you've never actually counted your vertebrae before now. And the crowd. Medieval townsfolk love a good flogging the way modern folks love a 3-day weekend. Vendors stroll through the mob, selling everything from apples to authentic commemorative pebbles. Some towns even hold a raffle for who gets to deliver the final lash, turning your punishment into a sort of medieval sweepstakes. Congratulations, old Agnes. You've won the right to whack your neighbour for petty theft. Please collect your prize. For minor offences, you might get off with a handful of lashes, enough to sting, but not enough to make you a permanent exhibit at the next village festival. For bigger crimes or repeat offences, you could be standing there for quite a while, watching the sun move across the sky and reconsidering every decision that led to this moment. The record for lashes is the sort of thing towns remember for generations, usually as a warning to grandchildren who don't want to eat their turnips. Medieval justice, for all its cruelty, is also fantastically unscientific. Sometimes the judge orders an extra lash for bad attitude. Sometimes he stops early because it looks like rain, and if you're friends with the right people, you might get a light sentence, a gentle tap or two, with everyone pretending not to notice. Afterwards, you're untied, aching, red, and possibly plotting your move to a town with more lenient management. The crowd disperses, already gossiping about who's next. You stagger home, counting your new stripes and hoping someone at least admired your bravery. Or, at the very least, your ability to stand upright. The scars fade, but the lesson lingers. Next time you're tempted to mouth off to your boss or sneak a loaf of bread, just remember, some feedback hurts more than others, and medieval HR doesn't believe in second chances or anesthesia. So, chin up. At least you're not at the whipping post. Yet. Accused of heresy? Witchcraft? Or just being too different? It's time to meet fire in a whole new way. The crowd gathers, the kindling is stacked, and you seriously regret not moving to the next village when you had the chance. There's a certain energy in the medieval air when someone's about to be burned at the stake. Think of it as the Super Bowl, except with fewer snacks and a lot more existential dread. In an era with no Netflix, public executions are the must-see event of the season. Townsfolk dress up for the occasion, kids are lifted onto shoulders for a better view, and the local vendors offer suspiciously crunchy pies that you hope are just overbaked, not overscorched. No one wants to be left out of the hottest ticket in town. It starts with the accusations. Heresy is a flexible term. Maybe you questioned the priest's sermon, read a book not approved by the bishop, or just happened to be a bit too enthusiastic about algebra. Witchcraft, even easier. Got a weird birthmark, an independent streak, or an unfortunate habit of knowing the weather before it happens. Congratulations, you're on the shortlist for today's bonfire. And don't get me started on being too different. Sometimes all it takes is the wrong hat, an unpopular opinion, or just being in the wrong place when a goat gets sick. The sentence is read in the town square, with great ceremony and plenty of dramatic pauses. You're led in, usually in borrowed clothing. They're not about to waste a perfectly good outfit on someone with such a short shelf life. Your feet are tied, your hands are bound, and you're attached to a stake, just in case you were considering a last-minute escape, Olympic sprinter style. Now, the crowd is buzzing. There's always one kid who asks, "Are we still having dinner later?" And at least one teenager trying to look edgy by pretending not to care. People you've never met are whispering about your supposed crimes, and someone inevitably starts a rumor that you once turned water into mead. The local priest or judge gives a rousing speech about the importance of purity, tradition, and not questioning authority, ever. It's hard to listen when you're eyeing the increasingly flammable pile at your feet. Then comes the fire, or more accurately, the awkward delay while the kindling stubbornly refuses to light. Nothing says sacred punishment like 3 grown men frantically striking flint while the crowd tries to look supportive. Eventually, though, the flames catch, and the air fills with smoke, heat, and a level of panic you'd normally reserve for accidentally replying all on a work email. As the fire grows, the crowd's excitement gives way to nervous shuffling. Medieval people might have been tough, but even they recognize that burning someone alive is a little much. Unless, of course, the weather's chilly, in which case it's also the warmest anyone's been all month. The confession you're supposed to make at this point rarely matters. The sentence was decided days ago, and any last words are mostly for the chroniclers, who will record it with the kind of bias only medieval historians can muster. If you're lucky, someone in the crowd feels a pang of mercy and tosses a green branch on the flames to create more smoke and less suffering. If you're really lucky, you're posthumously declared innocent 20 years later, long after it would have done you any good. When it's over, the town disperses, shaken but satisfied, already whispering about who might be next. The ashes remain as a warning: don't stand out, don't speak up, and definitely don't get caught with a suspiciously well-fed cat. In the end, burning at the stake is less about justice and more about fear, control, and medieval crowd control gone wild. So next time you roast marshmallows over a campfire, spare a thought for your ancestors. because history's hottest punishment is one bonfire nobody ever wanted an invitation to. You're led into what looks like an extremely goth wardrobe. The door swings open and you realize, oh, it's full of spikes. The Iron Maiden, less of a band, more of a warning about trusting anything described as innovative. At first glance, you might think you're just about to be fitted for a suit of armor. That is, until you spot all the sharp, shiny decorations lining the inside. This is not IKEA. This is the sort of closet that Marie Kondo would run screaming from, clutching her heart and questioning every item in her own home. If it sparks joy, it's only for the person who's about to close you inside. The Iron Maiden sits in the corner of the torture chamber with all the subtlety of a tax audit. It's human-sized, upright, and designed to look like a statue or a really bad attempt at medieval Art Deco. The face on the front is often carved into a scowl or a sneer, just to let you know that whatever happens next is definitely not covered by your health plan. As you're nudged closer, the torturer gives a little monologue. Every medieval torturer is an amateur thespian, after all. He might explain how the Iron Maiden is the latest in confession technology, guaranteed to get results and, if you ask nicely, possibly exfoliate your entire body in the process. You, meanwhile, are starting to notice that the spikes aren't randomly placed. They're set up with just enough care to avoid vital organs, because this is torture, not instant execution. The idea is to keep you alive and just uncomfortable enough to reconsider every questionable life choice you've ever made. Inside, it's cramped and dark, the iron walls closing in with all the welcoming warmth of a walk-in freezer during a blackout. As the doors are shut, you can see the crowd in the chamber, spectators hoping for a confession, an apology, or just a bit of lunchtime entertainment. You want to ask if anyone's taking requests, but your voice is muffled by a combination of terror and the very real need to avoid being impaled on a conversational level. Once the doors are closed, the experience becomes intimate. The spikes press in from every side, not enough to kill, but definitely enough to make you wish you'd paid your taxes, never talked back to the bishop, and kept your opinions about the Lord's new haircut to yourself. The pain is constant, an all-over headache for your entire body. Breathing becomes a risky, slow-motion negotiation with every square inch of your skin. From outside, the Iron Maiden is silent. No rattling chains, no dramatic screams, just a heavy, ominous presence. Sometimes, the torturer will walk around, giving it a gentle tap or two, like a chef checking if a pie is done. Meanwhile, you're inside contemplating whether you'll ever straighten your back again, or if your shoulders are now permanently shaped like a medieval pincushion. If you're wondering how long this lasts, the answer is, until someone gets what they want. A confession, a name, a vague apology, or just the satisfaction of watching you squirm. Sometimes the doors are opened, and you're pulled out, shaky and relieved to see anything that isn't lined with spikes. Other times, well, let's just say the Iron Maiden is a tough negotiator. Of course, historians love to debate whether the Iron Maiden was widely used or mostly a product of later, overactive imaginations. But the fear it inspired was very real. Just the sight of that looming, spiky wardrobe was usually enough to loosen the tightest lips and produce confessions for crimes you didn't even know were illegal. Did I conspire against the king? Maybe. Just please don't put me back in the closet. As you stumble out, bandaged and spiky in spirit, you gain a new appreciation for modern furniture, especially anything described as soft close. So next time you complain about your office chair, remember, some seating options in history were truly the stuff of nightmares. You're put into a squat, knees to chest and iron bars close around you. The Scavenger's Daughter. For those who thought being stretched wasn't creative enough, it's the yoga class from hell. Medieval Europe was nothing if not inventive when it came to inflicting discomfort, and the Scavenger's Daughter is living proof. While most torture devices are all about pulling, tearing, or rearranging your limbs like a particularly unfriendly chiropractor, this one's about compression. Think of it as the world's most diabolical origami project, with you as the paper crane. The moment you see the device, you realize no one here has ever heard of ergonomics. It's basically a series of iron bars with hinges that fold down over your bent body, turning you into the human equivalent of a packed lunch. Someone behind you mutters, "Try to relax," which is only slightly more helpful than a dentist telling you not to worry while waving a medieval drill. As you're locked into position, knees up by your ears and arms folded tighter than a 12th century tax return, you can't help but think of every moment in your life when you complained about an uncomfortable chair. Suddenly, the old family wooden bench seems like a memory foam mattress by comparison. You try to shift, but there's nowhere to go. Every inch is locked down, every movement makes the bars creak ominously. There's a philosophy at work here. If the rack was all about seeing how far you could be stretched before something snapped, the Scavenger's Daughter is about discovering just how small you can get before you start leaking secrets. Or, let's be honest, your last 3 meals. This is not a device for tall people, claustrophobes, or anyone who values the long-term health of their knees. It's like being packed for shipping by someone who only vaguely understands how the human skeleton works. The crowd, as always, is very interested. Medieval spectators never pass up an opportunity to see justice in action, especially when it comes with the bonus of watching someone get folded like a badly packed picnic. Some of the onlookers look sympathetic, others just curious, and there's always one overzealous villager making notes for next year's village fair medieval reenactment. You lock eyes with the local blacksmith, who seems both fascinated and relieved that he's not the one in the metal sandwich. The real magic of the Scavenger's Daughter is the pain it creates without ever leaving a dramatic wound. No blood, no visible cuts, just the quiet agony of your body being compressed into a shape not found in any anatomy textbook. Your joints ache, your back screams, and after a few minutes you start to forget your own name, but you'll always remember the sensation of your spine folding like a drawbridge. Medieval torturers, ever the multitaskers, often paired the Scavenger's Daughter with threats of the rack. If you won't stretch, maybe you'll compress. The psychological torment is almost as intense as the physical. You begin to confess to things you've only ever dreamed about. Yes, I stole the Lord's pie. Yes, I once hid a goose under my tunic. Just please, let me straighten my legs. When they finally release you, it's a slow, creaking affair. The bars rise, and you try to stand, slowly, carefully, and with the grace of someone who just realized their knees have aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The villagers look away politely as you hobble past, because there's no dignified way to exit the Scavenger's Daughter. You don't walk out, you unfold. By evening, you're grateful for every stretch, every yawn, every tiny bit of movement. The memory lingers. Next time you're asked to touch your toes in yoga, you'll have a story that no one else in the class can match. So, the next time someone says, "Just squeeze in," remember, medieval history proved there really is a limit to how much you should try to fit into a tight space. Tied to a wagon wheel, you wait as someone enthusiastically demonstrates the difference between joint and separate. You always thought wheels were for transportation, not redecoration. There you are, fastened spread eagle across a massive wooden wheel, contemplating every decision that led you to this very public circle of regret. The medieval breaking wheel isn't content with just moving you from place to place. It wants to turn you into something the villagers will talk about for generations. Forget the nice, straightforward punishments of the stocks or the pillory. The breaking wheel is for the truly unlucky, the spectacularly accused, or anyone who really annoyed the wrong baron at the wrong time. The process is surprisingly theatrical. Townsfolk gather as if it's a festival, craning for the best view as the executioner. Always a man who's just a bit too excited about his job, checks the tightness of the ropes, and gives the wheel a proud little spin. For some reason, someone is always selling snacks nearby. There are no programs, but the village gossip fills everyone in. Did you hear? He stole 3 loaves of bread and insulted the bishop's moustache. True or not, it doesn't matter. Once you're on the wheel, you're officially the main attraction. The actual breaking begins with a heavy iron bar, a sledgehammer, or if they're feeling fancy, a sturdy piece of firewood. The executioner's job is to methodically smash your arms and legs, weaving them between the spokes until you're more pretzel than person. The pain is unspeakable, the public spectacle relentless. The goal isn't just punishment, but deterrence. Everyone watching is supposed to leave a little more afraid of their own dark thoughts and definitely more appreciative of medieval leg armor. You may wonder, how did this become a thing? Like so many questionable traditions, it started as a way to impress people with just how serious authorities were about law and order. It's a one-size-fits-all message. Don't steal, don't rebel, and definitely don't write satirical poetry about the local nobility. Sometimes, after your bones are rearranged into a less functional design, you're left on the wheel in the town square for a while, part cautionary tale, part really terrible weather vane. The breaking wheel doesn't discriminate. Men, women, young, old. If your name ends up on the wrong list, you might find yourself getting rolled out for justice. For extra drama, some regions even light a fire under the wheel or display your remains as an extra strong warning against future bad behavior. The phrase, "going out in a blaze of glory," is much less fun when taken literally. The worst part might just be the anticipation. You're forced to watch the preparations, hear the crowds muttering, and see people you thought were your friends betting on how many strikes it'll take. There's nothing like the sound of your own mortality being discussed alongside the price of onions and the weather forecast. Oddly, there's always someone who claims the wheel isn't all bad. At least you're outside, they'll say. Fresh air, lots of company, and it's good for your circulation. Ignore them. The only thing circulating is village gossip about what you supposedly confessed before the first blow landed. If you somehow survive, which, on rare occasions, people did, you're hailed as either a miracle or a future saint. More likely, you become a legend, a warning, and maybe an entry in someone's family tree they never discuss at reunions. So next time you see a wagon wheel, give it a nod of respect. It wasn't just for bumpy rides and lost shoes. It was a front-row seat to some of medieval Europe's most imaginative and horrifying justice. And if you ever feel life's got you on the wheel, remember, at least no one's taking it quite so literally anymore. Someone decided that thumbs were just too happy. Enter the thumbscrew, a compact, portable misery machine designed to turn knuckles into jelly. Perfect for the torturer on the go. Let's face it, when it comes to medieval torture, most of the classics are large, expensive, and difficult to transport. Not the thumbscrew. It's the Swiss Army knife of pain, beloved by budget-conscious inquisitors and anyone who wants to inflict agony without breaking a sweat or a wagon axle. About the size of a small box and made from iron, the thumbscrew is simplicity itself. 2 parallel metal bars, a set of tightening screws, and enough bad intentions to ruin anyone's day. The whole thing starts off deceptively polite. You're invited to have a seat, usually on something much less comfortable than a chair, and asked a few questions. Maybe you're suspected of minor theft, or maybe you just know something the authorities would rather you didn't. Either way, when the confession doesn't come quickly enough, out comes the device. The crowd leans in, because everyone loves a demonstration, and the torturer smiles the way only someone who's found a creative use for office supplies can. Your thumbs, or sometimes your big toes, just for variety, are placed between the bars. The screws are turned, slowly. There's an art to this. Too fast, and you risk instant breakage. No fun for anyone. Too slow, and the audience loses interest. The perfect thumbscrew session is all about building tension, both physical and dramatic. Each twist brings a new world of pain, compressing bone and squishing flesh, until even the most stubborn secrets start bubbling to the surface. The best part for the authorities? The thumbscrew leaves no dramatic scars, just bruises, swelling, and a deep-seated mistrust of anything with a hinge. It's tidy, efficient, and doesn't require a clean-up crew. If you think modern office equipment is menacing, wait until someone brings out a medieval prototype that doubles as both a confession extractor and a handy paperweight. There's a social element too. The crowd gets involved, suggesting questions, ask if he took the cheese, did she hide the tax money? While you try not to faint from pain or humiliation, the local gossip takes notes for next week's stories. Sometimes, the village priest offers a blessing on the torturer, not you. It's all about community spirit. Of course, the thumbscrew isn't just about information. Sometimes it's used as a warning. Just a little squeeze to remind you who's in charge. Other times, it's the warm-up act for bigger, louder devices. Don't want to talk? Well, how do you feel about the rack? By this point, your priorities have changed dramatically. A few minutes ago, your main concern was maintaining your dignity. Now, you're bargaining your reputation for the chance to keep your thumbprints. The agony is strangely intimate. Pain focused on such a small part of the body, yet so overwhelming that it fills your whole universe. You learn exactly how important thumbs are. For the rest of your life, you'll flinch every time you see a nutcracker, a vice, or a friendly handshake that's just a bit too firm. When it's over, whether you confessed, lied, or just made up a story to stop the relentless pressure, you're left with throbbing hands, a new collection of bruises, and a healthy respect for the power of ergonomics. Even the simplest objects can become instruments of misery in the wrong hands. As you flex your battered thumbs, you vow never to take another joint for granted. You leave the chamber less sure of your secrets, and a lot more protective of your extremities. So next time someone offers you a handshake, just remember, medieval history is full of reasons to be careful who you trust, especially anyone with a toolkit. Your hands are clamped, and glowing metal is applied to sensitive places. The smell is like burnt toast. The sensation is like existential dread with a side of never shake hands again. If you thought the worst thing you could do with a hot iron was ruin your favorite linen tunic, the Middle Ages has a little surprise for you. Forget domestic chores. Here, the only thing getting pressed is your will to live. Welcome to the world of red-hot justice, where the solution to almost any problem, lying, theft, heresy, disagreeing with the magistrate's dinner guest, is a session with the local torture chamber's favorite grilling accessory. The setup is always theatrical. You're marched into a cold, stone room with ominous stains and a roaring fire that's a little too enthusiastic for anyone's peace of mind. Lining the hearth are iron rods and branding irons, glowing ominously like they've just been praised by the blacksmith's mother. The torturer selects a tool with the same nonchalance most people reserve for picking out a dessert, gives it a test sizzle, and then nods approvingly. The crowd, because of course there's a crowd, leans in, noses wrinkling, eyes wide. Your part in this drama is simple. Don't pass out, don't confess to inventing the wheel, and try to keep your dignity while someone presses a chunk of glowing metal against your skin. The heat is instant, searing, and impossible to describe unless you've ever stuck your hand in a bonfire and then tried to act casual about it. It's pain that travels faster than rumours in a medieval tavern, lighting up your nervous system and your imagination in equal measure. The main logic behind the hot iron ordeal is twofold: punishment and proof. In some cases, branding is the goal, marking you as a thief, liar, or general troublemaker for the rest of your life. If you think medieval tattoos were all about family crests and bravery, think again. Sometimes, the iron is pressed against your palm or cheek, leaving a scar that's both a warning and an ongoing reminder to never, ever get caught again. Other times, the ordeal is about divine judgment. You're required to grasp or be touched by a heated iron, and then, after a few days, everyone gathers to examine your wound. If it's healing cleanly, congratulations, you're innocent, and also apparently have the immune system of a demigod. If it's infected, sorry, that's proof of guilt. Never mind that the local doctor hasn't washed his hands since the last solar eclipse. The crowd's favourite part is the immediate aftermath, the sizzle, the smell, and your very human attempt to hold back tears while the local priest makes a note about your fortitude. There's no gentle medical care after the fact. If you're lucky, someone slaps a bit of mouldy bread on the burn and calls it healing. If you're not, you're left with an open wound, an open mind about relocating to another village, and a very clear reason to avoid all forms of public speaking for the foreseeable future. It's all over in a flash, but the experience lingers. For weeks, everyone in town recognizes the special limp or that hesitant handshake. Kids whisper legends about how you got your mark, and grown-ups tell each other, he must have deserved it. No one ever admits that most of the time, guilt had nothing to do with it. You survive, barely, and you carry your scar into the future as a permanent, unsolicited badge of medieval resilience. Next time you smell burnt toast, you flinch. Next time you see a blacksmith's fire, you cross the street. And you develop a lifelong appreciation for oven mitts. So, if you ever hear someone reminiscing about the good old days, just remind them, not every medieval cookout was a party. And sometimes, you're the main course. 2 sharp prongs, one pressed under your chin, the other in your chest, held in place with a leather strap. Look down, you stab yourself. Look up. You think about your choices. Welcome to the heretic's fork, the original posture corrector with a distinctly medieval twist. If you thought sitting through a day-long corporate training session was uncomfortable, just imagine your entire career review happening with a 2-pronged fork threatening to poke holes in your future. Literally. The heretic's fork is what happens when medieval authorities get creative and decide that torment should also be a test of your neck muscles and your existential patience. You're brought into a candlelit room. The torturer, always enthusiastic, never in a hurry, presents you with what looks like an oversized, poorly designed fondue utensil. 2 iron spikes, about 5 inches long, and a leather strap to keep everything snug. There's a short monologue about heresy, truth, and why you really should have kept your doubts about the bishop's haircut to yourself. The device is set. 1 spike nestles just under your chin. The other lines up with your breastbone. Your head must remain perfectly still and upright. If you nod, sag, slouch, or try to take a nap, ouch. The prongs gently remind you to stay alert, like the world's worst motivational coach. It's not just uncomfortable, it's a challenge. Your muscles burn, your jaw aches, and your eyelids flutter with exhaustion. And this is the medieval genius of the fork. There's no blood, no open wounds, no spectacle for the crowd. It's a private, personal struggle. Just you, your thoughts, and the constant threat of a self-inflicted poke. It's as if someone decided that guilt and posture could be corrected at the same time. Spoiler, only one of those improves. Meanwhile, your interrogators circle you like disappointed schoolteachers. They ask questions, you answer as best you can without moving your jaw too much. They love this part, watching you squirm, sweat, and try to stay composed while wondering if you ever really needed that second vertebra. The questioning is relentless, often repetitive, and occasionally absurd. Do you renounce your heresies? Did you talk to Agnes about the moon last Thursday? Do you know why the bread never rises on St. Swithin's Day? Every answer takes energy. Every minute feels like a full workout for your neck and soul. After a while, the pain changes, your muscles tremble, the urge to drop your head becomes overwhelming. You try to distract yourself, counting candles, reciting prayers, composing bitter limericks about your captors. Your mind drifts to memories of softer pillows and gentler times, and you realize that sleep deprivation and existential dread are really just the prelude to this spiky meditation. In some rare cases, the fork isn't even the main event. It's a warm-up for more dramatic devices, the rack, the wheel, or the ever-popular dunking stool. You're told that confessing will make it all stop. The fork, meanwhile, just keeps poking at your last reserves of patience. If you do survive the ordeal, you're released, shaky and stiff-necked, blinking in the sunlight like a confused ostrich. For days, maybe weeks, you carry yourself with unnatural uprightness. The local children imitate your walk for fun, and even your enemies admit you look a little taller. If you ever find yourself at a medieval dinner party, you'll be the only one with perfect posture, and a 1,000-yard stare that says I survived the heretic's fork. So next time someone tells you to sit up straight or keep your chin up, just smile gently and remember, in the Middle Ages, good posture was enforced by cold iron and a complete lack of mercy. And, like most things medieval, it was less about improvement and more about not getting poked in the neck. Picture a pyramid-shaped seat. Now, imagine being slowly lowered onto it. Now, stop picturing anything and just be glad you live in the age of ergonomic office chairs. The Judas cradle is proof that medieval Europe had a special knack for taking creative seating to nightmarish new levels. Forget lumbar support and adjustable height. This is the world's worst chair, designed not for productivity or comfort, but for maximum discomfort, public shame, and, occasionally, impromptu geometry lessons. The device itself is as subtle as a bad in-law. A tall wooden frame with a winch, a harness, and a pointy metal pyramid waiting beneath. Think of it as the original standing desk, except the only thing getting improved is your willingness to confess to literally anything. The accused is stripped, because, naturally, dignity is the first thing to go, trussed up and hoisted above the pyramid. All eyes in the torture chamber are on you, and you suddenly realize you'd rather be anywhere else. Stocks, pillory, even a week of dish duty in the castle kitchen. Then comes the slow descent. The torturer, an absolute master of pace and showmanship, lowers you inch by excruciating inch onto the point of the cradle. It's not designed to impale, usually, but to stretch, strain, and prod you into an entirely new relationship with gravity, your tailbone, and the unappreciated genius of modern chair padding. You quickly understand why medieval enhanced interrogation was less about questions and more about how much pain it takes for a person to say, "Yes, fine, I hexed the baker's bread. Just please give me a pillow." There's an audience, of course. No one invents a device like the Judas cradle without inviting a crowd. Officials hoping for a confession, bystanders hoping for gossip material, and a few nosy neighbours who really just want to see you get your comeuppance for stealing their favourite chicken 3 years ago. The atmosphere is a combination of horror and medieval rubbernecking. People exchange bets about how long you'll last. The town scribe is scribbling notes for the next lessons in morality sermon. The psychological torture is just as effective as the physical. Every movement threatens a new wave of agony. If you try to relax, pain. If you clench, pain. If you sneeze, yawn, or so much as blink wrong, pain. It's the only time in your life you'll wish you had less body mass. You become hyper-aware of muscles you never knew existed. There's no good side to this pyramid. Rumour has it that some torturers like to add a bit of flair, twisting the victim, jostling the cradle, or simply leaving them perched uncomfortably for hours. Confession was expected. Eventually, though some unfortunate souls simply confessed to anything, stealing, lying, or inventing the phrase, "the customer is always right." Once your ordeal ends, if you're lucky enough to see it end, you're untied, gingerly peeled off the cradle, and released into a world where sitting down will never feel the same. For weeks, you walk with a careful, haunted look, and the sight of a pointy chair leg can send you into a cold sweat. People in the village suddenly seem obsessed with cushions, and your new life motto becomes "flat is where it's at." In time, the memory fades, but the appreciation for soft, padded, thoroughly non-threatening seats lingers forever. If you ever find yourself grumbling about a long meeting in an uncomfortable chair, just be grateful your boss isn't a medieval torturer with a penchant for pyramids. So, next time you adjust your office chair, take a deep, grateful breath, because whatever else you face today, at least it's not the Judas cradle, and you can always stand up. Your hands are tied behind your back, you're hoisted up by a rope, and then, sometimes, they drop you a few inches. Shoulders, optional. The strappado is what happens when medieval interrogators decide that gravity isn't being used to its full potential. Forget gentle swings and hammocks. This is the dark side of hanging out. The method is disarmingly simple. Your wrists are bound tightly behind you, the rope is tossed over a sturdy beam, and with a nod and a heave, you're lifted off your feet. For a brief, disorienting moment, you get to feel what it's like to fly, minus the thrill and with all of the regret. The initial pain is instant and absolute. Your shoulders strain, your joints scream, and every nerve, from your fingertips to your neck, takes it very personally. It's an introduction to human anatomy you never asked for, courtesy of physics and the creative application of rope technology. If your torturers are feeling generous, they just let you dangle for a while. If they're in a particularly chatty mood or looking to speed things along, they drop you a few inches and let the sudden jolt do the talking. Sometimes they repeat this a few times, because apparently nothing loosens a tongue like the threat of your own arms deciding to check out early. The medieval audience, always eager for a spectacle, watches in horrified fascination. Some wince in sympathy. Others just make mental notes never to leave their windows unlocked. There's always one local who claims, "Back in my day, they used chains," and a handful of children are immediately inspired to try this at home with unfortunate cats or siblings. Of course, the strappado isn't just about pain, it's about control. You're utterly helpless, dangling like yesterday's laundry, trying to keep your composure while everything you own, including your dignity, stretches a little further away. The interrogators pepper you with questions. Where did you hide the stolen loaf? Did you conspire with the witch in the woods? Do you know why the miller's goat looks so guilty? Every answer takes effort, and every denial just means more time airborne. The real genius of the strappado is that, on the surface, it doesn't leave a dramatic scar. Sure, your shoulders may never work quite the same again, and for weeks you'll invent new ways to put on a tunic. But there's none of the blood, bruises, or branding that more theatrical tortures provide. Just a slow, invisible destruction of joints and willpower. For the torturer, this is a win-win. Confessions come quickly. If not, the victim is at least left quietly contemplating their life choices, future mobility, and the physics of knots. There's an unspoken threat. If the strappado doesn't do the trick, there are plenty of other options on the medieval menu, none of them involving rest or relaxation. If you're lucky, relatively speaking, your captors eventually tire of the sport and lower you to the ground. Carefully, if you've been cooperative, with a thud. If not, your arms feel twice as long, your back aches in places you didn't know you had, and you shuffle away with the world's worst posture and a new appreciation for the phrase shoulder day. Reputation-wise, you're now that person who hung tough. Children eye you with a mix of awe and caution, while elders use you as a cautionary tale against everything from tardiness to backtalk. It's not exactly the legacy you wanted, but it's memorable. So the next time you're tempted to grumble about lifting groceries or reaching for the top shelf, just remember the strappado, a medieval reminder that, historically speaking, hanging out could be a real pain in the well everywhere. And if anyone ever suggests you lighten up, just smile and keep your hands in front, where they belong. This one is exactly what it sounds like. Let's just say skincare routines have come a long way since 1350. There's creative punishment, there's unnecessary suffering, and then there's flaying. A punishment for the truly committed torturer who thought, what if we just took it all off? The Middle Ages, never satisfied with merely causing pain, brought a level of attention to detail that would impress any modern dermatologist, though for all the wrong reasons. Flaying was reserved for the most dramatic accusations. Treason, heresy, insurrection, or sometimes just being really, really unlucky. If you wanted to make an example of someone, flaying was your grand gesture, a performance piece for the whole town, a cautionary tale that would echo for generations, and probably make a few people vegan before the term even existed. The process is as horrifying as you'd imagine, and then some. The victim is restrained because, understandably, nobody volunteers to be part of this, while the executioner, often the most creatively disturbed person in town, sets to work with knives, scrapers, and the type of focus you normally only see at all-you-can-eat buffets. The skin is carefully separated from the flesh, sometimes starting at the arms or legs, sometimes right at the torso, depending on what message the authorities are trying to send. It's the ultimate all-eyes-on-you moment. Townsfolk gather in horrified fascination, torn between the urge to look away and the medieval equivalent of a traffic jam. Can you believe this? There's always one neighbor narrating the event as if he's calling a sports match. And now he's working on the left arm. Good form. Nice, steady hand. No matter how you try to tune it out, the memory lingers. For days afterward, the town's butchers see a mysterious uptick in vegetarian customers. The official reason for flaying is always to set an example. The real reason? Medieval authorities had a flair for the dramatic, and there's nothing quite like literal skin in the game to drive a point home. Sometimes, the flayed skin would even be displayed, hung from a gate or nailed to a wall, a sort of grotesque medieval wanted poster. No need for artistic interpretation. Everyone got the message. The pain, of course, is unimaginable and rarely survivable. It's the kind of ordeal that makes everything else, racks, wheels, pillories, seem almost quaint. Even the executioner's assistants, who have seen it all, try not to make eye contact with the victim or each other. In some particularly grim cases, the condemned were kept alive as long as possible, because apparently subtlety was not a medieval strong suit. If there's any silver lining to this horror, it's the fact that it was relatively rare, partly because even medieval towns had their limits, and partly because it took a special kind of person to do the job. Not every torturer had the stomach, the skill, or the time. Even in an age obsessed with spectacle, some things were a bit too much, even for the front row crowd. Afterward, the victim's name lives on in whispers, as a warning. Step out of line, and this could be you. No one walks past the old city gate without glancing at the stains and remembering the stories. Meanwhile, your average peasant thanks the saints for plain old bread and water justice and hopes never to see a sharp knife outside of soup preparation again. So, next time you wince at a paper cut or grumble about your moisturizer, just remember, medieval skincare was a whole different beast. And if anyone ever offers you a full-body treatment, maybe check the century first. Sometimes, history really is best left unpeeled. You, a clay pot, and one very motivated rat. The pot goes on your bare stomach, the rat goes in, and heat is applied. The rat looks for escape. The only way out is down. Yes, down. If you ever find yourself longing for the simple life of medieval Europe, allow me to introduce you to rat torture, a punishment that proves nothing is too weird, too desperate, or too biologically unpredictable for the creative minds of the Middle Ages. Here's a system where pest control doubles as psychological warfare, and where the phrase rat race takes on a whole new meaning. The mechanics are as delightfully simple as they are diabolical. First, you, the unfortunate accused, are tied down, because voluntary participation in this activity is statistically rare. A clay or metal pot is set on your bare abdomen, and inside goes a live rat, fresh from the local sewer, barn, or your neighbor's thatch roof. Already you're aware this isn't going to end with a cozy bedtime story. The next step. Heat. Sometimes it's a few glowing coals set on top of the pot. Sometimes it's a torch or a small fire built right there in the chamber. The logic is flawless in its horror. As the rat feels the temperature rising, its little rat brain enters survival mode. Trapped between a frying pan and a hard place, it does what any desperate rodent would do. It starts digging for freedom. The only way out is through you. The initial feeling is a strange pressure, an anxious scampering. Maybe you try to convince yourself it won't be so bad, that the rat will panic and faint, or that you'll faint first and miss the whole thing. But rats, as history and nightmares have shown, are famously persistent. As the pot gets hotter, so does the rat's motivation. The digging starts. You now have a front row seat to medieval innovation, and nature's least desirable collaboration. The crowd, as ever, is transfixed. Torture in the Middle Ages is never a private affair. Onlookers whisper and gasp, a few secretly hoping the rat escapes and causes general mayhem, others debating whether this method is worse than the rack, or just more memorable. There's always someone in the back who claims to have seen a rat chew through iron, and at least one aspiring poet working on a ballad called The Tale of the Troubled Tummy. For the torturers, rat torture is a 2-for-1 deal. You either talk, confess, or scream your innocence, and if not, well, there's always a slightly thinner suspect. And one very traumatized rat at the end of the day. The pain is sharp, frantic, and uniquely unnerving. You don't just worry about bones and muscles. You worry about the existential betrayal of your own skin as a potential escape route for something with claws. After the ordeal, if you're lucky enough to survive, you'll develop a lifelong aversion to rodents, clay pottery, and anyone who claims to have a foolproof method for getting to the bottom of things. You'll find yourself involuntarily checking for scampering sounds in every dark corner, and village children will point and whisper tales of the one who fed the rat and lived to tell about it. The message is clear. Confess to your crimes, obey the rules, and always check under your bed. Medieval justice is all about creativity and results, just not the kind you want to experience firsthand. So, the next time you spot a rat scurrying along a subway track or nibbling on a bagel in the city park, spare a grateful thought for modern pest control and soft, rat-free waistlines. Some punishments, and some vermin, are best left in the past. You're sentenced, the whole town comes out, and everyone's excited to see what creative finale the local executioner has planned. Popcorn is replaced by boiled turnips and trauma. Before Netflix, before cinema, before even those endless community talent shows, the highlight of the medieval social calendar was a good old-fashioned public execution. The invitation was never formal, but somehow everyone knew. Maybe it was the town crier's enthusiastic "Hear ye, hear ye." Maybe it was just the scent of opportunity and burning anxiety drifting through the air. Either way, people gathered by the hundreds, drawn by the same curiosity that makes you slow down at a fender bender, or click on a clickbait headline about celebrity toe fungus. It's a big day for the village. The bakers make extra bread, kids get a day off from mucking out the stables, and local vendors line up with snacks of questionable freshness and even more questionable origins. The best seats in the house? Right up front, close enough to smell the hay, the sweat, and occasionally the fear. You can't buy tickets, but if you're early, you might get a good view, or at least a safe distance from flying cabbage. The condemned is led out with all the ceremony of a reluctant parade float. Maybe it's you, or maybe it's someone you owe money to. Either way, you're center stage, in borrowed rags, shuffling through a sea of faces you hoped never to see this closely. Children sit atop shoulders, elders share stories about the last good execution, and at least one overzealous artist is sketching the scene for the next big tapestry. If you're really unlucky, there's a local bard composing verses about your crimes as you walk past. The execution itself is as much theatre as punishment. The executioner, resplendent in his finest apron, loves the attention. This is his moment, and he spent all morning polishing the tools of the trade: axe, sword, rope, or for special occasions, the elaborate wheel or pyre. There's always a brief speech, half moral warning, half product demonstration. Let this be a lesson to all, they say, as if you're just a particularly inconvenient teaching aid. Sometimes, if the crowd is in a forgiving mood, the execution is quick. A single, clean swing, a dramatic drop, or a mercifully efficient blow. But let's be honest, efficiency isn't really the point. Sometimes the executioner draws it out, pausing for dramatic effect, soaking up the applause and the turnip throwing if things don't go smoothly. There are gasps, cheers, the occasional fainting, and plenty of whispered bets on whether the blade is sharp enough or if the gallows will creak under pressure. The emotional range of the crowd is astonishing. Some are here for vengeance, others for closure, and a few just to break up the monotony of life without indoor plumbing or reality TV. For the children, it's both nightmare fuel and a crash course in don't do what that guy did. For the adults, it's a chance to bond, gossip, and, occasionally, reflect on their own tenuous relationship with authority. Afterward, the town disperses with the low hum of satisfied spectators. The vendors pack up, the bard tries out his new song, and the kids practice mock executions with sticks and suspiciously willing chickens. For days, the event is all anyone talks about: the weather, the price of hay, and whether the condemned deserved it. New legends are born, reputations are ruined, and the town square, once again, is just a place for old men to grumble and for pigeons to argue over breadcrumbs. In the end, public execution wasn't just justice, it was entertainment, social glue, and a brutal reminder that in the medieval world, you always wanted to be in the audience, not the main act. So next time you complain about a boring Friday night, remember, there was a time when movie night came with turnips, trauma, and an absolutely terrible aftertaste. Sometimes torture is for justice. Sometimes it's just a way for the authorities to pass the time, settle scores, or pick up a few coins from onlookers who love a good show. It's less due process, more pay-per-view. In medieval Europe, the boundary between legal process and local entertainment was about as thin as the average peasant's soup. The town's official torturer, yes, that was a real job, and not even the weirdest one on offer, was a master of multitasking, part public servant, part entrepreneur, part event planner for the bloodthirsty masses. When official cases ran dry, there was always another opportunity to squeeze a little extra value from the town's infrastructure. It started with the basics. The town would build a shiny new pillory, stocks, or even a wheel, and soon discover that the villagers were less interested in actual justice and more excited about the spectacle. Nothing draws a crowd like the promise of a confession or the threat of a thumb getting squeezed until it sounds like wet gravel. A few coppers gets you a front row seat. For a bit more, you could even sponsor a turnip or rotten egg to hurl at the accused. It was medieval crowdfunding in action. And then there were the private sessions. Some officials took requests. Want to get back at the neighbour who always lets his geese wander? Slide a few coins to the right guard, and suddenly there's an anonymous accusation of looking shifty at the market. The line between justice and personal vendetta was blurrier than a mug of medieval ale. Townsfolk learned quickly that, with enough pocket change, a little public discomfort could be arranged for anyone who crossed the wrong line, or the wrong local merchant. The torturer himself was a minor celebrity. If you wanted to make extra money on the side, it helped to have a flair for the dramatic and a strong stomach. Want your business to boom? Offer bulk rates for multiple confessions? Or start a punch card? Get your 5th torture free. Local bards composed songs about their favourite sessions, while entrepreneurial bakers introduced whipping post pastries and dunking stool donuts, hoping to cash in on the spectacle. Children reenacted scenes at home, using their siblings and unfortunate barn cats. For the authorities, this was all gravy. Fines, bribes, and confession fees filled the town's coffers. Justice, in theory, was being served, just with a little extra spice and a whole lot of audience participation. Sometimes the authorities would even rent out the stocks to neighbouring villages or wandering lords for a small maintenance fee, spreading the joy and the profits far and wide. Of course, it wasn't all fun and games. Every so often, a travelling noble or bishop would raise an eyebrow at the carnival atmosphere and demand an investigation, at which point the whole town would pull together to act shocked and promise to behave until the official left and the next dunking chair raffle could begin. The real winners were, of course, the town gossips. Each torture session generated hours of prime material. Did you hear what she confessed to? I saw the blacksmith wince during the branding. He must be hiding something. News spread faster than the plague, and the next time someone ended up in the stocks, you could be sure the crowd would be twice as big. It's easy, now, to look back and shake your head at medieval entertainment. But human nature is stubborn. Swap out the pillory for reality TV and the ducking stool for office politics, and suddenly things don't seem so different after all. So, next time you're tempted to complain about modern bureaucracy, remember the medieval side hustle. When in doubt, monetize the misery. And if you hear of a local raffle involving rotten produce, maybe skip buying a ticket, just in case. After enough time with any of these devices, you're confessing to everything. Did you steal the bread? Sure. Plot against the king? Why not? Hide the TV remote? Absolutely, just please stop with the thumbscrews. In medieval Europe, the justice system wasn't just about catching the guilty, it was about getting someone, anyone, to admit to something. The formula was simple: a dash of pain, a sprinkle of humiliation, and a generous ladle of public pressure. After a session with the rack, the wheel, or just a few hours of bell-ringing monks debating the meaning of sin, even the most innocent villager could be convinced they masterminded every unsolved crime since the Black Death. Let's say you start out stubborn, determined to protect your good name. You grit your teeth through the first few questions, maybe even the first round of encouragement, a bit of time in the stocks, a gentle whipping, or the comforting embrace of the scavenger's daughter, yoga class not included. But the hours stretch on, the pain grows sharper, and your resolve, like your muscles, starts to unravel. After a while, you're not even sure what you're denying. Stealing apples, burning down the barn, looking suspicious at the maypole dance. If the crowd wants a confession, it's easier to just give them one. This is the secret source of medieval justice. Torture wasn't really about the truth. It was about closure, entertainment, and keeping the records tidy. Once you'd confessed, no matter how ridiculous the crime, everyone could relax. The scribe got to finish his paperwork, the priest got a sermon topic, and the local torturer got a pat on the back and maybe a bonus turnip. And the best part? The authorities didn't even have to be creative. After enough time on the Judas cradle, or with a rat sniffing around under a clay pot, the victim did the heavy lifting. False confessions came pouring out, sometimes for things that hadn't even happened yet. Yes, I plan to steal the king's goose next Tuesday. I once thought about eating meat on a Friday. I invented algebra. You'd say anything if it meant getting out of the stocks before dinner. Of course, this led to some problems. Whole families would go down in a wave of confessions. Your neighbour, desperate for a lighter sentence, would point the finger at you. You, in turn, would confess and name your cousin, who was only guilty of having a suspiciously large hat. Before long, half the town was on trial for a bread theft that never happened, and everyone was guilty of something, if only of being too slow to run away when the constable came knocking. False guilt became its own cottage industry. Medieval artists depicted entire towns in chains, confessing to sins as diverse as witchcraft, heresy, bad dancing, and keeping chickens that clucked after sundown. The system was self-perpetuating. The more people confessed, the easier it was to justify more torture, more trials, and even more creative punishments. In rare moments of reflection, some townsfolk would wonder if, perhaps, just maybe, torturing everyone into submission wasn't the best way to find the truth. But these thoughts usually disappeared by morning, especially after the local priest reminded everyone of the virtues of obedience, humility, and keeping your head down, sometimes literally. If you survived your confession, you emerged a changed person, more careful, more cautious, and forever wary of anyone wielding a rope, a hot iron, or a really, really enthusiastic bell. For years afterward, you'd flinch at the sound of the town crier and develop a nervous tic every time someone mentioned confession. So, next time you lose your keys and start blaming yourself, remember, in the Middle Ages, everyone was guilty of something eventually. It's just that some confessions took a little more persuasion. And nobody ever found that TV remote. Congratulations, you survived. Sort of. Now you limp back home with fewer teeth, new phobias, and a healthy distrust of anything involving ropes, iron, or public gatherings. Sleep tight, if you can. If you're lucky enough to make it out of the medieval justice system in one piece, or at least with most of your original pieces attached, you soon discover that surviving torture is just the beginning. The Middle Ages has no aftercare, no therapy, and certainly no compensation for emotional distress. There are no "I survived" the rack, and all I got was this lousy t-shirt support groups. There's just you, your wobbly knees, and a village full of people who now treat you like a living cautionary tale. First, there's the physical fallout. Walking is an adventure. Maybe your joints creak, your shoulders sit at two different heights, and your thumbs make a sad little clicking sound every time you pick up a turnip. Your new signature look includes a patchwork of bruises and scars, each one a medieval badge of justice. You're constantly inventing new ways to avoid stairs, ladders, and enthusiastic handshakes. Every meal is an exercise in chewing creatively, since dentistry mostly involves prayer and a hope that you don't bite down on anything harder than porridge. Then there's the sleep. Good luck with that. Medieval insomnia means lying awake in your straw-filled bed, flinching at every distant clang of a bell or whisper of the wind. Was that a rat in the attic, or just your memory reliving the Great Pot incident? Dreams are a highlight reel of public humiliation, near misses with red-hot irons, and being enthusiastically accused of stealing Mrs. Gregor's chicken. You develop a sixth sense for approaching constables and a startle reflex that would put a startled goat to shame. The mental toll is even heavier. The very sight of a rope, an iron poker, or even a kitchen ladle sends you into a cold sweat. You find yourself jumping at the mention of public gathering, festivals, market days, even harmless sheep-shearing contests. Any sentence beginning with "would you mind" has you running for the door. You become an expert in blending in, never making eye contact, and always keeping your head down, but not too low, lest someone accuse you of hiding something. Social life is a challenge. Some neighbors avoid you, worried that whatever bad luck you have is contagious. Others treat you like a local celebrity, whispering about your adventures whenever you walk by. Children invent new games called stocks and turnips, and you find yourself the unwilling referee. The village bard writes a catchy tune about your endurance, and it becomes the background music to your daily errands. There's a silver lining, though, a kind of grim wisdom. You become the village expert on what not to do. People consult you for advice. Is it worth complaining about the bread? Should I say anything about the Lord's hat? Your answer is always the same: absolutely not. You become a master of low expectations, grateful for any day that doesn't involve ropes, iron, or the phrase, "bring out the torturer." Eventually, the bruises fade. The stories grow wilder, and a new unlucky soul takes your place in the medieval rumour mill. But the lessons remain. You develop a newfound respect for the soft things in life: pillows, moss, and soup that doesn't bite back. And, somehow, you carry on, because medieval people were nothing if not stubborn, and after surviving torture, every day feels just a little like victory. So if you ever find yourself lying awake, dreading tomorrow, remember your medieval ancestors. They endured the stocks, the rack, and the worst communal bathwater in history. You, at least, can hide under the covers. Sleep tight. Just don't let the rats or the village gossip get you. Every profession has its secrets, and torture is no exception. Meet the medieval torturer, part craftsman, part therapist, all nightmare fuel. Trained through a mix of grim apprenticeships and questionable on-the-job learning, your local torturer is somehow both the most popular guy at parties and the last person you want to owe money to. He takes pride in his work, sharpens his tools with loving care, and offers you the medieval version of "Are you comfortable?" Spoiler, you never are. Torturers aren't just born, they're made. In an age without online courses or certification exams, the path to this unique career usually starts young. Perhaps you're a blacksmith's apprentice who shows just a little too much enthusiasm for making things sharp. Maybe you're the local butcher's assistant who asks, "What else can I do with these leftover bones?" Or perhaps you're just the town's best listener, able to absorb secrets, fears, and confessions, all while keeping your apron suspiciously clean. The apprenticeship is as much about attitude as skill. You shadow a master torturer, observing the delicate art of tying knots that won't slip, heating irons to just the right level of sizzling, and adjusting the rack for optimal stretching, without actually detaching anything important unless requested. There's a surprising amount of paperwork too. Confession forms, injury reports, and receipts for miscellaneous supplies that you sincerely hope don't include old Margaret's best rolling pin. Torturers develop a reputation for craftsmanship. They customize devices for every occasion and every body type. Is your accused tall, short, particularly flexible? No problem, there's a tool for that. The best torturers keep their instruments razor-sharp and splinter-free most of the time, and take pride in polishing the Iron Maiden until it gleams like a warning. Every tool has a name, a purpose, and a favorite story attached. Just ask, and you'll get a personalized tour. There's also a psychological side. The best torturers know it's not just about pain, it's about anticipation. The slow walk past the rack, the deliberate clatter of chains, the thoughtful sharpening of a blade while making meaningful eye contact. These are classic moves straight from the Customer Service for Sociopaths handbook. We're here to help you. Help yourself, they might say, with a smile that's equal parts friendly and terrifying. The line between therapy and threat gets blurry, fast. Surprisingly, torturers are often well-liked at social events. Their stories are legendary, their sense of humor dry as the town's last biscuit, and they know everyone's secrets, sometimes before even the priest does. But there's always a subtle undercurrent of fear. No one wants to be the one who spills wine on the torturer's boots or borrows his pliers without asking. At the annual village festival, the torturer is both guest of honor and the reason why half the crowd is avoiding eye contact with the sausage-making demonstration. Professional pride runs deep. Torturers compete for efficiency, fastest confession ribbons, creativity, most inventive use of kitchenware, and job satisfaction, fewest permanent injuries this quarter. Apprentices hope to one day earn their own set of tools, a custom apron, and maybe a quiet retirement running a candle shop. Or at least, fewer nightmares. The real mark of a master? A gentle touch, a well-timed sigh, and the uncanny ability to make you confess not just your crimes, but also your secret regrets, your unpopular opinions, and that time you accidentally set the haystack on fire. The torturer doesn't just extract pain, he extracts the truth, or at least something that sounds plausible enough to close the case. And as you're led away, joints aching and dignity dented, you realize the truth. Customer service hasn't changed all that much. The tools are softer now, and the surveys are electronic, but the feeling of, is there anything else I can help you with today, still makes you shiver. So next time you encounter someone whose job is to motivate compliance, remember, the medieval torturer paved the way, and he always sharpens his tools, just in case. Nothing says family outing like a trip to see someone else's misery. In the Middle Ages, torture wasn't just justice, it was entertainment. People showed up early to get the best spot, kids ate questionable snacks, and your neighbor's weird uncle provided color commentary. If you thought rush hour traffic was bad, try fighting a crowd for front row seats at a public flogging. No refunds, but plenty of screaming. You might think of medieval life as all hard work and religious devotion, but everyone needed a break from the daily grind of plague, famine, and not bathing. Enter the public punishment. Part civic duty, part reality show, part medieval amusement park. The only thing missing was a souvenir stand, though you could always take home a bruised apple or a piece of authentic executioner's rope if you were willing to fight old Agnes for it. Execution days, floggings, and even a solid thumbscrew session drew crowds from miles around. Markets would shut down early, bakers baked extra loaves, and the travelling pie man suddenly became everyone's best friend, if not for the pies, then at least for the distraction. You'd gather your family, bundle up the kids, and make your way to the town square. where the only seats available were whatever you could carve out by aggressively nudging your way to the front. If you arrived early enough, you could grab prime real estate near the pillory, where all the best splatter landed. Latecomers had to settle for second-hand gossip and the dubious pleasure of peeking between the shoulders of the local blacksmith and his 7 sons. Kids sat on shoulders, dogs darted underfoot, and there was always one goat who just wanted a better view. Vendors worked the crowd, hawking everything from sticky buns to roasted chestnuts and, for the truly bold, execution eels, don't ask, don't eat. The atmosphere was half carnival, half ominous tension. Street musicians tried to keep things lively, but everyone's attention was glued to the platform, the stake, or the stocks, wherever today's entertainment was scheduled. And the commentary. You didn't need sports announcers. Your neighbour's uncle, the one with the missing tooth and the endless supply of unsolicited opinions, provided a running narrative. He's starting with the thumbscrews. Classic move. Ooh, that's going to leave a mark. Bets were made. 5 coppers says he confesses before lunch. Medieval people were nothing if not resourceful when it came to making the best of a bad situation, especially if it involved someone else's pain. Kids learned early that you didn't want to end up on stage. Do your chores or the stocks for you, was the medieval version of I'm turning this car around. Still, there was a certain pride in attending a really memorable event. The older generation compared punishments. This is nothing like the great boiling of 47, and the truly ambitious teenagers dreamed of someday being the town crier, or, for the drama-inclined, the executioner himself. Not all torture tourism was grim. Sometimes punishments included light-hearted humiliation, dunkings, pie to the face, or the ever-popular, let's see how many onions we can balance on the accused's head. For a brief moment, the line between justice and slapstick comedy blurred, and everyone went home with a story to tell. As the crowd dispersed, the town square echoed with chatter, laughter, and the occasional traumatized whimper. People returned home to tell their neighbors what they'd witnessed. You wouldn't believe the noise. And children reenacted the spectacle with dolls and mud pies, and the unlucky star of the show got to limp home, now a minor celebrity and permanent cautionary tale. In the end, torture tourism was about community, a shared experience, a reminder of the rules, and a perfectly medieval way to bond over boiled turnips, splinters, and the certain knowledge that, for today at least, you were safely in the audience. So next time you're annoyed by traffic at a sports game or grumble about overpriced popcorn at the movies, just remember, at least nobody's selling execution eels, and the only thing being stretched is your patience. Here's the fun part. You finally confess, but no one believes you. Maybe you're innocent, maybe you're not. Doesn't matter. In the grand tradition of medieval justice, if your story doesn't match the local gossip or the judge's mood, you get another round of enhanced interrogation. Telling the truth, lying, or just babbling in pain. Every answer earns you the same prize. More quality time with your friendly neighborhood torturer. This, more than anything, is what makes medieval justice a special brand of psychological endurance sport. In the modern world, you might get a stern warning or a second chance if you come clean. In the Middle Ages, truth is just another ingredient in the stew, and you have no idea who's doing the stirring. The only constant is that the authorities are always hungry for more. More details, more confessions, more reasons to keep the audience entertained. It begins with hope. You've survived the first few persuasion sessions, a phrase that covers everything from the thumbscrew to that rat-in-a-pot situation. You decide to throw in the towel, confess, come clean, offer up the story you think they want to hear. Yes, I stole the Lord's chicken. Yes, I consorted with the town witch. Yes, I once thought about eating meat on Friday. Can I please go home now? But medieval justice isn't satisfied with easy answers. The judge narrows his eyes. The town scribe frowns and scratches something out in his book. Maybe your confession is too short, too bland, or, worst of all, too plausible. That can't be all, someone mutters. Everyone knows the real thief wore a red hat. Or, the baker's wife said you don't even like chicken. The crowd grumbles. Your confession doesn't fit the script everyone else has been writing in their heads since market day. And so, back you go, into the stocks, onto the rack, or just into another round of exhausting, circular questioning. They want more details, a better story, or simply a confession that matches what the judge heard last week from a guy who once saw you looking at the moon suspiciously. Tell the truth, they say, while waving a hot iron. But the only thing more dangerous than lying is not lying enough. It's a lose-lose situation. Tell the truth, and they think you're hiding something. Make something up, and they know you're lying. Stay silent. And, well, silence is the surest sign of guilt in a system where the absence of evidence is just more evidence. The authorities might even help you remember by reciting your neighbor's accusations, offering helpful reminders. Didn't you once mention not liking the Lord's hat? Or just threatening you with another session with the local rodent population. The result is chaos, confessions on top of confessions, stories changing with the wind, and a whole town convinced that anyone could be guilty of anything. Medieval justice isn't really about finding the truth. It's about closing the case, pleasing the crowd, and reminding everyone that the only thing worse than telling a lie is telling the truth to someone who isn't listening. Eventually, you realize the real goal: just survive. Maybe you give them a story so wild, so entertaining, that even the torturer laughs and lets you off for creativity. Maybe you confess to something so boring that everyone loses interest. Or maybe you just outlast them all, becoming the subject of next week's tavern gossip. Did you hear? He confessed to stealing the sunrise. The lesson? In the world of medieval justice, honesty is rarely the best policy. It's just another chance to test your endurance and, perhaps, improve your improvisation skills. So next time someone says, "Just tell the truth and everything will be fine," remember your medieval ancestors, surrounded by ropes, rats, and very suspicious judges. And maybe practice your poker face, just in case. So you survived your session on the rack. Congratulations. Now you're tossed into a medieval cell, which makes your childhood treehouse look like a luxury spa. Dark, damp, crowded, and only occasionally infested with rats the size of dachshunds, your jail cell comes with straw bedding, questionable water, and a roommate who won't stop singing. Think of it as a trial subscription to solitary confinement, but with added lice. Welcome to medieval jail, where the concept of room and board is more of a suggestion than a reality. Forget fluffy towels and mint on the pillow. Here, you get a clump of straw that may or may not contain yesterday's prisoner, and your welcome drink is water so suspicious that you'd rather take your chances with medieval ale. Every inch of the cell is curated for maximum discomfort, from the oozing walls to the smell of centuries-old despair. Space is at a premium. Medieval towns didn't exactly have sprawling correctional facilities. Think of it more as a cupboard under the stairs, but with more screaming. The cell is barely large enough for you and your fellow guests, who range from actual criminals to unlucky travelers caught outside after curfew. Some are awaiting trial. Others have already confessed to 3 crimes they didn't commit, just for the promise of a slightly softer patch of straw. Privacy? Not a thing. You're pressed elbow to elbow with strangers, all of whom snore, mumble, or plot their escape in whispers you pretend not to hear. If you're lucky, your cellmate is just an over-enthusiastic bard working on his latest masterpiece. If you're not, he's a professional pickpocket who has somehow already stolen your dignity and half your remaining teeth. Amenities are, let's say, rustic. Lighting comes courtesy of a single candle stub, which everyone takes turns guarding like it's the Holy Grail. The toilet is a bucket in the corner, and if you thought the stocks were humiliating, wait until you have to negotiate sharing the facilities with 4 strangers and a rat that answers to Sir Nibbles. Ventilation is courtesy of a tiny, barred window, placed just high enough to remind you that you're not getting out without a ladder, wings, or divine intervention. Food is technically included, but only if you're comfortable with mystery gruel as a main course. Sometimes the jailer tosses you a crust of bread so hard it could double as a weapon. Water, as mentioned, is a gamble, greenish, lukewarm, and carrying the unmistakable tang of disappointment. Every meal is a new adventure in culinary compromise. If you have friends or relatives willing to bribe the jailer, you might get a treat, a chunk of cheese, or, if you're lucky, soup that doesn't glow in the dark. The best part? Time moves at the speed of erosion, with no idea when or if your trial will happen. Every day is a blend of boredom, anxiety, and trying to remember what it felt like to have circulation in both legs. Entertainment options include counting lice, arm wrestling with your cellmates, or composing sad ballads about porridge. The guard occasionally drops by to offer cheerful advice. Confess and I'll open the window, and everyone takes turns glaring at him through the bars. You try to sleep, but between the cold, the noise, and the existential dread, you mostly just lie awake, plotting increasingly desperate escape scenarios. Could you tunnel out with a spoon? Bribe Sir Nibbles to chew through the door? Pretend you're dead and hope they throw you out with the compost? Every night brings a new scheme, and a fresh reminder that medieval jail is just a holding pattern between one miserable ordeal and the next. So next time you complain about hotel pillows or a bad Airbnb review, spare a thought for the medieval jailbird. Because in a world without comfort, privacy, or decent plumbing, you learn to appreciate every ray of sunlight and the day the jailer finally forgets to lock the door. So tonight, as you lie back in your cozy bed, no thumbscrews, no rats, no suspiciously eager neighbor watching you from the end of the block, just take a slow, grateful breath. You've survived a virtual journey through the darker corners of medieval justice, where confession was less about honesty and more about how long you could hold your breath underwater. Think about how resilient people really were, managing to endure punishments that sound like rejected plot lines from a particularly grim reality TV show. The rack, the wheel, the ever-popular stocks. Somehow, real people face these with a mix of fear, stubbornness, and, occasionally, sheer medieval optimism. And let's not forget, even the torturers had to go home at night and explain their day to their family over a bowl of lukewarm pottage. Tonight, you get clean sheets, soft pillows, and a level of privacy medieval folks would consider a miracle. No one's going to drag you to the village square at sunrise. You're safe from public humiliation, hot irons, and whatever passes for enhanced interrogation in your household, unless you count that one cat that likes to attack your feet at 2 a.m. If history teaches us anything, it's that humans are endlessly stubborn, surprisingly creative in their suffering, and always ready to invent one more uncomfortable way to pass the time. But they were also resilient, finding moments of kindness, laughter, and hope even in the shadow of the gallows. So, as you drift off tonight, maybe send a quiet thank you to your ancestors who survived the wheel, the whip, and, somehow, communal bathwater. Because if you woke up tomorrow in the Middle Ages, let's be honest, you wouldn't last 5 minutes. Sleep well, be grateful for your mattress, and remember, history may be terrifying, but at least it's behind us. Good night.